So this guy literally just threw away the best thing that ever happened to him because he couldn't handle dating a woman with actual principles. I'm Scarlett. I'm 28, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how someone can just flip like that after 8 months together. 8 months of what I thought was building something real, something meaningful. And then he just decides my core beliefs are too much work for him to deal with. I met Grayson at this friend's game night back in January. He was 30, had his life together, worked in some corporate thing with shipping or logistics or whatever. And he seemed so different from all the immature guys I'd been wasting time with. Actually listened when I talked, always insisted on paying, even though I work in healthcare administration and can handle my own bills, and never once made me feel bad about being passionate about important issues. For the first time in forever, I thought I'd found someone who could appreciate a strong, independent woman instead of being intimidated by her. The early months were honestly perfect. He'd pick me up for dates. We'd have these great conversations about everything, and he never shut me down when I talked about things that actually matter. I've always been pretty vocal about women's rights and social justice. It's literally who I am as a person. I share educational content on Facebook. I'm active in online communities discussing feminism and equality. And I've never been the type to stay quiet then when I see injustice happening. That's just basic human decency, right? Standing up for what's right shouldn't be controversial. Grayson seemed totally fine with all of this initially. He'd even liked my posts sometimes and never argued when I explained how systemic oppression actually works. I really thought I'd finally found a guy who wasn't threatened by dating someone with actual convictions and the courage to speak up about important issues. When I'd show him articles about dismantling oppressive systems or call out misogyny when we encountered it, he'd just nod along. I figured he was processing everything and learning, which honestly was refreshing after dealing with so many toxic guys who couldn't handle basic education about equality. We started talking about moving in together around month 6, maybe getting a bigger place than my 1-bedroom apartment. I was so excited because everything felt like it was heading somewhere permanent. We even discussed marriage in general terms, what we both wanted, long term, our values, our goals. I really believed we were building towards something beautiful together, something based on mutual respect and shared principles about making the world a better place. But now I realize he was probably just telling me what he thought I wanted to hear the whole time. Men are so good at pretending to be something they're not until they think they have you hooked, and then they show their true colors when they decide the work is too hard. It's honestly disgusting how they can lie to your face for months, acting supportive of your beliefs, and then suddenly decide they can't handle being with someone who actually stands for something meaningful. Looking back, there were probably signs I should have caught earlier, like how he never really engaged deeply with the important topics I brought up, or how he'd always try to steer conversations toward lighter, more surface level stuff. I thought he was just more laid back than me, but apparently, he was silently judging everything I believed in and just waiting for the right moment to reveal how he really felt. What kind of person does that? Who spends 8 months pretending to respect someone's core values and then decides they can't handle it anymore? He could have saved us both time by being honest from the beginning about what kind of woman he actually wanted. Instead, he let me believe we had a future while secretly deciding that fighting for basic human rights was too much drama for his comfortable little life. The whole thing just proves everything I've been saying about how men handle relationships. They want all the benefits of being with a strong, intelligent woman, but none of the responsibility that comes with actually supporting her growth and activism. I should have known better than to think I could find a man who was actually secure enough to handle being with someone like me. Most guys talk a good game about wanting an independent woman, but the moment you show them what that actually looks like in practice, they run back to seeking someone more manageable and easygoing, someone who won't challenge them to examine their privilege or grow as human beings. The most frustrating part is how he made it seem like this was just some incompatibility we discovered instead of acknowledging that he was the one who changed. I've been consistent about who I am and what I believe from day one. He's the one who decided my principles were suddenly too inconvenient for his vision of what our relationship should look like. But of course, in his mind, I'm probably the difficult one for refusing to make myself smaller for his comfort. Things started getting weird around month 7. but I was too trusting to see the pattern developing. Grayson began making these little comments that felt off, but he'd always frame them as jokes, so I couldn't call him out without seeming overly sensitive. Like when I shared an article about toxic masculinity on Facebook, he saw it and made some dismissive comment about how some people take this stuff way too seriously. When I asked what he meant by that, he just laughed it off and said he was kidding. But something about his tone felt different, colder somehow. The first real incident happened at his friend Trevor's place during this casual get together with his social circle. I was having a conversation with some of the other women there about workplace discrimination. And this one girl, honestly, kind of a basic pick me type, who probably thinks feminism went too far decades ago, kept trying to argue that we don't need women's rights movements anymore because apparently everything's equal now. I couldn't just sit there and let that level of ignorance slide. So I took the time to educate her about how systemic oppression actually works and gave her some real facts about wage gaps and glass ceiling effects that are still happening today. The whole time I'm explaining these important concepts, Grayson is just sitting there looking uncomfortable instead of backing me up or supporting the educational conversation. Here I am doing the emotional labor of teaching people about issues that affect half the population, and my own boyfriend can't even be bothered to show solidarity. Later in the car, he actually had the nerve to tell me I'd been a little intense, and maybe I should have just let the misinformation go since we were guests in someone's home. I was like, excuse me? Since when is educating people about basic human rights being intense? These aren't matters of opinion we're discussing. These are documented facts about how oppressive systems operate in our society. He tried to backtrack and said he just meant we were there to have fun, not debate politics. But here's what he didn't understand. Calling out injustice isn't politics. It's basic moral responsibility. The fact that he couldn't see the difference was honestly the first major red flag that should have told me everything I needed to know about his character. Around this same time, I started noticing he was acting weird about my online activism. I'm pretty active on Reddit in various feminist communities because silence is complicity, and I regularly share educational content on Facebook to raise awareness about important issues. But he started making these passive aggressive comments about how much time I spent arguing with strangers on the internet when I explained that it's called activism and using your platform to make a difference. He'd just do this dismissive little laugh that honestly made my skin crawl. The pattern became even more obvious with how he started treating my friends. My friend Isa is super woke, and we love having deep conversations about social issues and systemic problems that need addressing. When she'd come over to my place, Grayson would suddenly become really quiet and find excuses to go work on something in the other room. At first, I thought maybe he was just giving us space for girl talk, but then I realized he was actually avoiding her because he couldn't handle being around women who speak their minds and refused to pretend everything's fine when it's not. He also started doing this really gross thing where he'd make subtle digs about my appearance when I dressed professionally or confidently. Like if I wore a blazer to work, he'd make some comment about how I looked intimidating or too serious. When I'd style my hair in a sleek ponytail, he'd say he preferred it down because it was softer and more feminine. It was like he was trying to push me toward being smaller and more palatable instead of appreciating the strong, confident woman he was supposedly dating. Classic manipulation tactics designed to make women doubt themselves. But the absolute worst incident was when we were watching this Netflix series about women in corporate environments, and there was a scene dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. I made a comment about how unfortunately common that actually is and how most of women have experienced some form of it. And he literally rolled his eyes and said, "Here we go again. Here we go again." Like discussing real issues that affect millions of women was some kind of burden for him to endure rather than an opportunity to learn and show empathy. I should have ended things right then and there, but I actually believed I could help him understand if I just approached it the right way. I thought maybe he was just sheltered and needed someone to open his eyes to what was really happening in the world around us. I genuinely believed that with patience and the right educational resources, I could help him become a better person and a real ally. God, I was so naive to think someone could change when they clearly had no interest in doing the work. After those concerning incidents, I decided I needed to be more intentional about helping Grayson understand important social justice issues. I really believed deep down that he was just uninformed and needed someone to guide him toward developing a better understanding of systemic problems. So I started being more strategic about sharing educational content with him and creating opportunities for meaningful conversations about oppression and inequality. I'd send him well-researched articles throughout the day about things like gender pay gaps, workplace discrimination, and how patriarchal systems actually hurt everyone, men included. I figured if I could show him the data and statistics from credible sources, he'd finally realize how wrong his initial reactions had been and start taking these issues seriously. When he wouldn't respond to my texts about the articles, I'd bring them up during dinner or when we were hanging out, trying to create space for him to process the information and ask questions. He just kind of nod along politely, but I could tell he wasn't really absorbing any of the important information I was sharing with him. It was like talking to a wall. Sometimes he'd give me these blank stares when I tried to explain concepts like intersectionality or systemic privilege. The most frustrating part was how he'd completely shut down whenever I tried to have real conversations about how these issues affected our daily lives and relationships. Like when I tried to explain how his reaction to my friend Ela was probably rooted in internalized misogyny and discomfort with women who challenged traditional gender roles. He accused me of psychoanalyzing everything and said I was reading too much into what he claimed were just normal social interactions. But that's exactly the problem. These interactions aren't normal when you actually understand the bigger picture of how society conditions us to react to strong women. I also started paying more attention to his friend group, and honestly, it explained so much about his resistance to growth. Trevor and his other buddies were exactly the type of guys you'd expect. They'd make borderline offensive jokes about women and then act like anyone who didn't laugh, just couldn't take a joke. When I'd point out why certain comments were problematic and harmful, they'd all exchange these looks like I was being overly dramatic or sensitive. Meanwhile, Grayson would just sit there silently instead of educating them about why their behavior was unacceptable. The breaking point with his toxic friend group happened at this sports bar where we went to watch some game. One of his buddies made this completely gross comment about our waitress's body. And when I said that was objectifying and disrespectful, they all started laughing and saying I was being too uptight. Grayson just sat there like a complete coward instead of calling out their disgusting behavior. Later, he actually had the audacity to tell me I was embarrassing him by standing up against sexism. Like, fighting objectification was somehow more embarrassing than tolerating it. That's when I realized the real problem wasn't just Grayson's ignorance about feminist issues, it's his complete unwillingness to grow, learn, and challenge himself or others. He was perfectly content existing in his comfortable little bubble of privilege without ever examining his role in perpetuating harmful systems. I tried explaining to him that when you know better, you have a responsibility to do better, but he kept insisting he didn't want our relationship to be all about politics all the time. But here's what he refused to understand. He refused to understand this isn't politics, it's basic human rights and dignity. The fact that he could just ignore these issues because they didn't directly affect him showed exactly how privileged and out of touch he really was. I started to see that what I had initially interpreted as simple ignorance was actually willful blindness and resistance to change, which is honestly even worse than not knowing. I kept trying though because I really believed our relationship was worth fighting for and that he had the potential to become a better person. I'd share more educational articles, try to have patient conversations about why representation matters, explain how microaggressions work and impact people's daily lives. I even suggested we watch some documentaries together about social justice movements, but he'd always make excuses about being tired from work or wanting to just relax during our free time together. Looking back now, I can see that I was basically doing all the emotional labor of trying to educate and improve him while he just coasted along, benefiting from my efforts without putting in any real work himself. He was happy to let me do all the heavy lifting of growth and education while he remained comfortable in his ignorance. That's exactly the kind of dynamic that feminism exists to challenge and change. Everything came to a head about 3 weeks ago, and I still can't believe how terribly he reacted when I finally tried to have an honest conversation about our future together. We were at his place making dinner, and I brought up the idea of moving in together since we'd been discussing it for weeks. But this time I wanted to make sure we were actually compatible on the important values and principles before taking that major step in our relationship. So I started explaining how crucial it was to me that my future partner understood my beliefs and could actively support my activism and work toward social justice. I told him I needed someone who could be a real ally in fighting against oppressive systems, not just someone who'd passively tolerate my convictions while remaining uninvolved. I thought I was being really mature and reasonable by having this conversation before we moved in together, but apparently he took it as some kind of personal attack on his character. He got this look on his face like I was speaking a completely foreign language. And then he said something that honestly shocked me to my core. He said he'd been thinking about our relationship a lot lately, and he wasn't sure we were as compatible as he had originally thought when we first started dating. When I asked what he meant by that, he started going on about how he didn't really understand why I was so obsessed with feminism and social justice issues. That's when I knew I had to be completely honest with him about who I am as a person and what I stand for in this world. I explained that feminism isn't some hobby or phase I'm going through. It's a core part of my identity and how I see and interact with the world around me. I told him that if he had a fundamental problem with that, then he had a problem with me as a complete person. I also pointed out that his obvious discomfort with strong, outspoken women was exactly the kind of internalized misogyny that feminism exists to address and challenge. But instead of listening and trying to understand where I was coming from, he just got defensive and started saying all this ignorant nonsense about how modern feminism has gone too far and how it's divisive and unfairly attacks men. He actually said he thought feminism was making relationships unnecessarily difficult because it teaches women to be suspicious and critical of men instead of working together harmoniously. Like, what the whole point is that we shouldn't have to work around systems that systematically benefit men at women's expense. Then he said the thing that really revealed his true colors and showed me exactly who he was underneath the nice guy facade. He said he didn't think he could marry someone who identified as a feminist, because he wanted a partner who could appreciate traditional relationship dynamics and who wouldn't analyze everything through a political lens. When I pointed out that those traditional dynamics were literally designed to oppress and limit women, he said I was proving his point about taking everything too seriously and making everything about gender politics. I tried to explain to him that what he was saying was actually deeply misogynistic, that wanting a woman who won't challenge unfair systems is literally wanting to benefit from and perpetuate sexism. But he completely lost his mind and said I was calling him a sexist just for having different opinions about relationships. Different opinions. We're talking about basic human equality and dignity here, not whether pineapple belongs on pizza or what movie to watch tonight. The worst part was when he said he'd been walking on eggshells around me for months because he was afraid of saying something that would set me off or trigger another lecture about social issues. Set me off, like holding people accountable for harmful views and educating them about reality as some kind of character flaw or unreasonable behavior. He made it sound like I was this volatile, unreasonable person who couldn't handle normal conversation, when really I was just refusing to let ignorant comments slide without challenge. I told him that if he thought supporting women's rights and basic human equality was too much work or too complicated for him to handle, then he was exactly the kind of man that feminism exists to educate and challenge. That's when he said he was done with the conversation. And maybe we should take a break to think about what we both really wanted from this relationship. A break. After 8 months of building what I thought was something meaningful, he wanted a break because I wouldn't pretend to be someone I'm not to make him more comfortable. The next morning, I woke up thinking maybe we'd both just been heated in the moment and could work things out like mature adults who care about each other. I mean, I was still deeply hurt by the things he said and how he'd reacted to my core beliefs, but I figured once he had time to cool down and really think about everything, he'd realize how wrong and hurtful his response had been. So I texted him asking if we could talk and maybe approach the whole situation differently with more patience and understanding. His response was honestly shocking and showed me exactly how little our relationship had meant to him. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking overnight and he didn't see how we could move forward together given our fundamental differences. When I called him to ask what he meant and tried to have an actual conversation, he basically dumped me over the phone like we were teenagers who'd been dating for a few weeks instead of serious adults who'd spent 8 months building something together. He said he realized we had fundamental incompatibilities and he didn't want to keep trying to make something work that was clearly causing both of us stress and conflict. Stress like fighting for basic equality and human rights was just some annoying hobby that was inconveniencing his comfortable life. He made it sound like I was the problem for having principles and refusing to compromise on issues that actually matter in the world. The absolute worst part was when he said he thought I'd be happier with someone who shared my passion for activism and that he needed someone more easygoing about social issues and politics. Easygoing, he literally wanted someone who would just ignore injustice and smile pleasantly while the world burned around her. He wanted one of those peaky girls who thinks feminism is too aggressive and that women should just be grateful for whatever scraps men decide to give them out of the goodness of their hearts. I tried to explain to him one more time that this wasn't about being difficult or creating unnecessary drama. It was about standing up for what's right and refusing to accept systems that harm people. But he just kept saying he respected my views, but didn't think we were a good match for long-term compatibility. Respected my views. You can't claim to respect someone's fight for basic human rights while simultaneously saying it's too much work to support them or learn alongside them. What really gets me is how he made the whole breakup sound like it was mutual or some inevitable conclusion we'd both reached, when really he was just too weak and comfortable to handle being with a strong woman who challenges him to grow. He even had the nerve to say he hoped we could stay friends and that he thought I was an amazing person who would find someone perfect for me someday. Like throwing away an 8-month relationship was just some casual decision that didn't deserve a real conversation or any effort to work through our differences like adults. After we hung up, I was honestly in complete shock. I kept thinking about all the time and emotional energy I'd invested in helping him grow and understand important issues and how he'd just thrown it all away because he was too comfortable in his privilege to do any real self-reflection or personal development. I'd opened up to him about my deepest values and beliefs, shared countless articles and resources to help educate him, and tried to be patient while he learned about systems of oppression. And his response was to decide that fighting injustice was just too much drama for him to handle in a relationship. The more I thought about, the angrier I became, not just about him dumping me like I was some inconvenience, but about how he'd wasted months of my time pretending to be someone he clearly wasn't. If he knew from the beginning that he couldn't handle being with a feminist who actually lives her values, why didn't he just say so instead of leading me on? Why did he let me think we had a real future together when he was apparently just tolerating my core beliefs the whole time while secretly judging them? And honestly, the way he ended things just proved everything I'd been trying to teach him about toxic masculinity and how men handle emotional conflict. Instead of having a real conversation and working through our differences like mature adults, he just bailed the moment things got challenging or required him to examine his own beliefs. That's exactly the kind of emotional immaturity that feminism exists to address. Men who can't handle the labor of difficult conversations about important topics. I posted about the whole situation on Reddit because I needed to process what happened with people who would actually understand the dynamics at play and the support was overwhelming. So many women shared similar stories about men who seemed supportive initially, but then revealed their true colors when asked to actually engage with feminist principles beyond surface level tolerance. 6 months later, I found out through mutual friends that Grayson is engaged to some girl named Hannah, who apparently thinks feminism is too aggressive and believes women should focus on supporting their men instead of fighting what she probably calls imaginary oppression. I saw her Instagram through a friend's account, and she's everything I expected. One of those women who posts inspirational quotes about being a traditional wife and how blessed she is to let her man lead the relationship. But here's the thing that really messed with my head. Apparently, she's some kind of nurse practitioner who makes really good money and has an advanced degree, but she's already talking about stepping back from her career after they get married. She literally spent years in school earning a master's degree and building professional skills, and she's throwing it all away to play house with my ex-boyfriend. The same guy who couldn't handle me having opinions about basic equality is now with someone who's willing to make herself smaller and more dependent for his comfort. What makes it even worse is that everyone acts like they're this perfect fairy tale couple. I keep seeing photos of them at the same social events I used to attend with him, and she's always smiling this big fake smile while looking completely adorable and non-threatening. Meanwhile, he looks totally relaxed and happy, like he finally found exactly what he was looking for, a woman smart enough to make him look good, but traditional enough to never challenge him on anything that actually matters. The engagement happened really fast too, which honestly just proves my point about how he was never serious about personal growth or working through difficult conversations. He probably proposed to her within 3 months because she was so easy and agreeable compared to the stress of being with someone who actually had standards and expectations for her partner's character development. I've been trying to move on and date other people, but honestly, the dating scene is absolutely horrible right now. Every guy I meet either doesn't understand feminism at all or claims to be an ally, but then shows their true colors the moment I express any strong opinions about social justice. It's like Grayson ruined me for other men because now I can immediately see all their red flags and manipulative behavior, but apparently that makes me too picky or intimidating. According to people who think I should just settle, my friends keep telling me I dodged a bullet and that I'll find someone better who actually deserves me. But it's been 6 months, and I'm starting to wonder if there are any men left who can actually handle being with a truly independent woman. Maybe Grayson was right that feminism makes relationships harder, but not for the reasons he thought. It's harder because most men are too weak and selfish to do the actual work of examining their privilege and growing as human beings. The worst part is seeing how genuinely happy and at peace he looks with Hannah. In all our photos together, there was always this slight tension in his eyes, like he was constantly trying to figure out how to handle me or what I might say next. But with her, he looks completely relaxed and content, like he finally found someone who won't ask him to be better than he naturally is or challenge him to think about anyone other than himself. I know I should probably be grateful that he showed his true colors before we moved in together or got even more serious, but honestly, I'm just angry. Angry that I wasted 8 months trying to educate someone who had absolutely no interest in learning or growing. Angry that he gets to ride off into the sunset with some Stepford wife while I'm stuck dealing with man after man who can't handle a woman with actual convictions and opinions, and angry that society rewards men like him for choosing the easy path instead of doing the hard work of becoming genuine allies. But whatever. I'm completely done compromising my values or making myself smaller for men who aren't worth my time or energy. If being a feminist means I have to be single, then at least I'll be single with my integrity and principles intact, unlike some people who are apparently willing to throw away their education, independence, and self-respect for male approval and the illusion of traditional security.